Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. We're looking at a major and very serious development in a highly publicized legal case today. A Los Angeles judge has recently ordered the musician David Anthony Burke, who you probably know professionally as D4vd, to stand trial. This comes right after a 5-day preliminary hearing. Today, we're going to stick strictly to the facts of this ruling. We'll look at what the prosecutors presented, how the defense pushed back, and most importantly, what the judge's ruling actually means in the real world.
Here is our roadmap for today. We'll cover 1. The court's ruling. 2. The legal standard. 3. The prosecution's case. 4. The defense's response. 5. What the decision means. And 6. What happens next.
All right, Section 1. The court's ruling.
So, the immediate news is that David Anthony Burke has been ordered to stand trial following that 5-day hearing. But I want to anchor this right away with a really crucial fact. He has pleaded not guilty. That is our vital starting point here. The judge's ruling simply means they found enough evidence for the criminal charges to continue. It absolutely does not mean Burke has been convicted, and it definitely doesn't decide whether he's guilty.
Now, the charges themselves are incredibly serious. They center around the tragic death of 14-year-old Celeste Rivas Hernandez. Burke is currently facing charges of murder, continuous sexual abuse of a child under the age of 14, and unlawful mutilation of human remains. I want to be explicitly clear here. These are charges and allegations presented by the state. They're not final findings of fact.
Moving on to Section 2. The legal standard.
To really understand the news, we first have to understand the legal mechanics behind it. You're going to hear the term preliminary hearing a lot in cases like this, but what does it actually mean? Well, a preliminary hearing is absolutely not a criminal trial. It's just a legal proceeding where a judge decides if there's enough evidence for a case to continue. In plain language, prosecutors don't have to prove their entire case at this stage. They just need to meet a specific, lower threshold to keep the wheels of the justice system turning.
And this brilliantly illustrates exactly what we're talking about. The standard for a preliminary hearing is called probable cause. It's a lower burden of proof. The judge is merely deciding if there is enough evidence to make the defendant answer the charges. Now compare that to beyond a reasonable doubt. That is the highest burden in our legal system, and it is strictly required for an actual trial conviction. At this preliminary stage, the court was only looking for probable cause.
Section 3. The prosecution's case. During those 5 days in court, prosecutors laid out several broad categories of evidence to build their theory. We saw forensic testing, DNA findings, digital communications, purchase records, vehicle evidence, and, of course, testimony from investigators. This is essentially the foundation of the prosecution's argument that Burke is responsible for Celeste's death. But again, keep in mind, this is currently their unproven theory.
Let's look at the forensics. A major part of the hearing leaned on DNA evidence. An expert testified the genetic material collected from some items on Burke's property strongly matched Celeste. On top of that, a forensic witness detailed chemical testing that indicated the possible presence of blood in parts of a garage. Prosecutors are arguing that these specific forensic findings back up their version of events.
Beyond the science, prosecutors also brought in purchase records and more testimony from investigators. They argued that certain purchases, made after Celeste was last seen, add weight to their theory of what happened next. But I'll say it again just to be completely clear, this interpretation is just part of the prosecution's case right now. It hasn't been proven at a trial.
Section 4. The defense's response.
Now, what's really interesting here is how the defense responded. Burke's attorneys didn't just offer a generic denial. They were highly methodical. They challenged the collection, the handling, and the interpretation of the evidence. They actively disputed whether the state had established the necessary intent for the most serious charge. And, crucially, they heavily pressed the state's own witnesses on the actual definitive limits of those DNA and forensic findings.
Let's zoom in on those limits. During the testimony, the expert actually acknowledged some major caveats. Yes, DNA evidence might connect a person to a location or an object. But the testing presented could not establish exactly when that genetic material was left there. And in some cases, it couldn't even determine its precise biological source. In a courtroom, that distinction is massive. It means DNA doesn't automatically prove how the material got there, who committed an act, or what their intent was. The defense also hammered on the limits of the chemical tests. When questioned, the forensic witness admitted that the testing did not conclusively establish that the substance in the garage was actually blood.
Now, let's be fair. This doesn't render the prosecution's evidence totally meaningless, but it absolutely means that the true weight and certainty of this evidence is going to be a major subject for legal argument moving forward.
Section 5. What the decision means.
So, the crucial point we need to take away is understanding the strict boundaries of the judge's ruling. The judge found probable cause. That's it. Prosecutors presented just enough evidence to keep the criminal process moving. However, and this is key, this was not a conviction. The judge absolutely did not find Burks guilty beyond a reasonable doubt.
To really ground us in the current reality of the defendant's legal standing, let's look at this principle. The burden of proof remains with the prosecution. Burke remains presumed innocent unless and until he is proven guilty in court. That is the absolute bedrock of our legal system, and it remains fully intact today, even as this case moves forward.
Section 6. What happens next?
Let's see how this builds and what we can expect next. The next confirmed date is a post-preliminary arraignment on August 31st in Los Angeles County Superior Court. That's where the case formally shifts into its next phase. After that, we hit the pretrial phase. This is where the real legal maneuvering happens. Both sides will file motions and continue to fight over the very evidence we just talked about. Only after that does it move into trial preparation. Keep in mind, court dates change all the time, and a lot of this evidence could be limited or even thrown out before a jury ever steps foot in the room.
Before we wrap up today, it is absolutely vital that we pause and remember the reality at the center of this legal process. Celeste Rivas Hernandez was just 14 years old. Her death is the reason this entire case exists. We can't let her disappear behind the celebrity name of the defendant, or the technical disputes over forensics, or the chatter about a musician's career. Responsible analysis means following the facts, yes, but without ever losing sight of the tragedy that started all of this.
So I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. We've seen the prosecution's broad strokes, and we've seen the defense's sharp, calculated challenges regarding the limits of that evidence. As this case transitions from the relatively low hurdle of probable cause to the incredibly strict high bar of proof beyond a reasonable doubt, how will those specific evidentiary limits shape the final outcome when a jury finally hears it? That is absolutely going to be the defining tension of the trial to come.
Thank you so much for joining me to walk through the facts of this ruling today. Follow Neural Edge Publishing on Spotify for the next source-checked court update. The full case file, all our supporting sources, and a free update list are linked right down in the description below.